Spoiler warning for Deltarune Chapter 5. Go and play it or watch it before watching this video. So, Deltarune Chapter 5 is crazy, as I and everyone have probably realized. Chapter 5 both created, destroyed, and supported many theories, including Woody theory. How is it still relevant? Absolutely no hate to Spooky Dude, by the way. While I'm not necessarily proposing any specific theory, I feel like Chapter 5 provided so many interesting characters to dissect and compare to other ones that are actually eerily similar. This being Flowery and his Undertale counterpart, Flowey. It's pretty obvious that Flowery is meant to represent Flowey, both names being a single letter apart and sharing a track in each respective OSTs that are very similar in name. While the connections between the two might seem surface level, the similarities go surprisingly deep, defining and highlighting what makes two seemingly alike cases very different. So, stick with me to the end, as you might realize something along the way that you never had previously thought of. Also, one last thing before you get in. Because of how similar their names are, I will put who I'm talking about on screen as I'm talking about them, just to clear any confusion and potential misspeaking. As well as this, I'll have any link to any Undertale long play that I might use in the description, as I don't have 18 free hours to go through both major routes. So then, without any further ado, let's talk about sentient plants. Before we talk about the new kid, let's review an old friend, Flowey. In Undertale, Flowey is the general overarching antagonist in both Flower, Omega, and Azrael form, in the neutral and pacifist routes. As well as this, he serves as a sort of tutorial fight that tells us how to move and what to expect in future fights, and explains their philosophy immediately, which is you either kill or be killed. From the first fight, it's clear that Flowey was set up to be an antagonist opposed player, both in combat and to challenge Flowey's philosophy of killing and violence. This idea of challenging what you're told to do is the entire point of the true pacifist route, in which you make Flowey's mind break, trying to spare him after doing whatever he did in Omega form, and after torturing all the souls of the underground in Azrael form, in which he cannot comprehend that you would still spare him after all of that. But why? Why is someone who possesses such a vast knowledge of the world they live in incapable of accepting mercy after doing such violent actions? Well, he quite literally says it after the Omega fight. Flowey literally does not see mercy as a way to triumph, only as a way to delay the inevitable death that you will face. Because of this, he thinks mercy will cause you to only stand still and cannot move forward. In other words, he does not believe people can stay nice forever. But to further understand Flowey, we need to know what he was like before becoming a flower. First of all, Azrael was a very kind-hearted person, as they were only a child when they died. Shortly after the death of the first fallen child, Kara, Azrael wanted to help bring their body to the village where they came from, which required Kara's soul to cross the barrier. Despite being stronger than any monster human in the underground or anywhere else, he never attacked the people who trapped the monsters, even when being actively attacked by them. Because of his integrity and unwillingness to harm others, he passed away on a bed of flowers. So, how can such a kind-hearted person be corrupted into such a violent creature? Well, I believe there are two major reasons. I swear I'm not addicted to making lists. First of all, despite being born from Azrael's dust, Flowey isn't actually Azrael. While they at times have a similar face, voice, and appearance as Azrael, they merely just have those general qualities. Azrael's actual soul and body did die, meaning that this is just merely a copy, basically. Because of this, all of Azrael's memories, morals, and anything else that shaped his person disappeared and never made it to the flower. This might seem wrong, because when he does become Azrael at the end of the true pacifist route, he seemingly remembers everything. That's because everyone else, including Asgore and Toriel, did remember Azrael, which meant he was able to remember himself from their memories, if that makes sense. Which means Flowey is being kept alive just with the will to live, not with a purpose. Which leads to number 2. Purpose to live matters more than anything else. Determination in Undertale gives the holder the power to live. So then, how do monsters live if they can't have the source of being alive? And the answer is purpose, a soul. Every monster has a soul, which drives them to be alive and live with reason. It's also never stated that monsters can't have determination. I mean, look at Undyne. She literally rebuilds herself with determination. Monsters just generally have a low amount. Flowey, despite having the will to live, doesn't have a purpose. He exists only to exist. Because of this, he has no clue what to do, what to think, or how to handle the power he was unfortunately given. Because of this, he tried to find purpose on his own by exploiting his ability to control timelines, helping, killing, and everything in between time after time. Even if his body has been influenced by someone with a soul, that soul unfortunately shattered and left an empty, broken shell. So, how does it relate to Flowery at all? Well, let's get into it. Like I did with Flowey, let's start with who is Flowery. Flowery is Asgore's so-called best friend and his roommate from college, as Asgore seemingly has always had a passion for gardening. Unlike his Undertale inspiration, Flowery is inherently kind and deeply cares for Asgore and the other flowers, and often acts as a leader for the other flowers as well. Weirdly enough, Flowery also seems to care for Rousey for some reason as well. Even if it's just to make Chris using Rousey let the Dark World live for Asgore, he still acts genuine and helps him in several places. So, how did Flowery come to life? The answer is obvious, the Dark Fountain that Chris nonchalantly made. Dark Fountains bring ordinary objects to life by seemingly giving them will to live, and while that could be true, the real answer is each fountain gives Darkeners a purpose to live in each Dark World, allowing each Darkener to exist if they can fulfill that purpose, which means staying in that Dark World, or in the oddity that is Castletown. But something else of note is that the creator of a Dark Fountain impacts greatly how a Dark World is shaped. I mean, the evidence is in Chapter 4, which pretty clearly shows the Glade going from an item in Chris's inventory to an enemy. The Glade first appears as an enemy in the second sanctuary, which Susie made, which reflects the fact that she views writing the message that Kirsten told her to write as a difficult challenge that needed to be overcome. With that being said, does Flowery, similarly to the Glade, reflect the inner thoughts of the Dark Fountain's creator? Or in other words, does Flowery reflect the inner thoughts of Chris? First of all, he acts as Asgore's bro and tells him to forget about his family and hang out with him. Flowery has also said that he was Asgore's roommate, which is probably more so that Asgore just started growing Flowery in college, which means he was probably taking the role that Rudy actually played, which was being a close friend to Asgore. Even though Chris did make this fountain, I don't think Chris had much influence over Flowery, as they're not quite a Darkener and not quite a Lightener. Because they're not entirely an inanimate object, I think that Flowery had more control over what they wanted to be in the Dark World than someone such as a Lancer did. I'm bringing this up because at the end of Chapter 5 we do see them go back to flowers, which means that they can kind of at least control what they look like in Dark Worlds. One last major thing about Flowery is, how did he view the world? Flowey from Undertale thought that it was either kill or be killed, with no in between, which was meant to be challenged by the player. So Flowery must have something pretty similar, right? And that is right, because Flowery, just like Kirsten told Susie, is telling Rousey that they can defy fate and challenge the prophecy, even if it is just by leaving the Dark World and letting it exist. Furthermore, Flowery's interests seem to be for the best of Asgore. Anytime Asgore tells Flowery to do something, he follows, even if he doesn't personally want to or thinks it's not the right thing to do. But something to note is that Flowery tried to be as non-violent as possible for as long as he could, only resorting to fighting later on. And this goes back to the motivations of Flowery, which are in the best interest of Asgore, so of course you wouldn't want to actually hurt Chris, right? Okay, so maybe he is willing to get violent occasionally, but generally he still does avoid fighting the Fun Gang directly. So then, what are the overlap between these two golden flowers? So, how are these two flowers alike and different? Besides name in relation to Asgore, both of these flowers share meta-knowledge on how their world works. Flowey in Undertale has the ability to save and load, at least before you show up, meaning they also probably knew what you can and couldn't do. Flowery, on the other hand, knows how the config menu, the battle UI, and the ability to make fake stats, which is something nobody else can ignore, other than the Roaring Fraud, who almost actually lost to Flowery. The only other person who shares this level of knowledge is Rousey, who has extensive knowledge of the prophecy and how battles, items, and Dark Worlds work, as well as both are stupidly strong, even if Flowery is kinda fake. In Undertale's true pacifist route, Flowey can effortlessly trap everyone, including Sans, which still doesn't make much sense, not mentioning the fact that Flowey can, at least a little bit, control all 6 of the human souls, and every monster soul in the underground, even if it was temporary. Flowery, likewise, went band for band with the Roaring Fraud, something no one else has been able to do successfully, other than Susie, and even if he failed. Besides that, he can still move really fast, control battles, and even crash the economy, something that not even Rousey can stop. One last connection is relationships between the colored souls and the stand-in, the flowers. In both games, both flowers take control of the other colored objects and temporarily become really strong, or in other words, Omega. But unfortunately, this is where the differences begin, because Flowey takes the souls by force, which results in the rebellion of the souls, causing Flowery to become weaker than ever. Flowery, on the other hand, leads the colored flowers with care and treats them as individuals, which allows him to cooperate with them and become stronger together. The reason Flowery and Flowey are so different is because of a difference in philosophy. He was able to cooperate and have mercy and care for others, which is something Flowey could never do. So then, why are these two seemingly very similar characters so different? The biggest reason why they're different is because the circumstances under which they were created were very different. Flowey was only given the will to live, no purpose or no reason why. Flowery, on the other hand, had a purpose. He had a soul in the Dark World. This is actually reflected in Flowery's sprite, in which his eyes, the so-called window to the soul, are colored in like a darkener. While Flowery might only be an immobile flower in the light world, in the dark world, there's a fire burning inside of him, driving to live with purpose and care for others. So, the biggest takeaway from the situation is that it doesn't matter if you have the will to live. What truly matters is if you have the reason to live, the reason to keep on fighting and exist. Which does in fact fit in with Deltarune's main themes, which is trying to be free from your strings and live with your own purpose and own self-forged path. The entire arc of the flowers from Deltarune is really cool, and probably something that most people might glance over. While a lot of it is pretty surface level and easy to pick up on, some of the deeper nuances are only visible once you look at Flowey from Undertale. It will never fail to me how great Toby Fox is at writing characters that only last for one chapter. One of these characters is Spamton, who I do plan to cover in the future, so make sure to subscribe for that. Either way, click one of these two videos, as they're probably pretty good, I think. At least I hope they are. And like I said, every resource that I use will be in the description, especially the long plays. This wasn't meant to be a comprehensive overview of Flowery, just analyzing the specific circumstances that brought him into life and what's different from Flowey. But anyways, make sure to subscribe because you're quite literally at the very end of the video.